Today I'm going to be showing you how to change the strings on your acoustic guitar, and this will apply to almost all acoustic guitars. You're going to need a set of strings, obviously, and then some things that will help: a string winder, wire cutters, small pliers, some cleaner, a tuner is nice. You don't need the tools, but they help the job go a lot easier. So before we get started, let me just say something real quick. I've met so many people that maybe haven't restrung their guitar very much, or they're new, and they're scared to touch their guitar. They're scared to turn those pegs and work on the guitar. They don't know how to restring something, and it's just a frightening experience. Let me tell you that it's just a normal thing. Anybody can do it. You can learn how to do it. You can get better at it. You're not going to ruin your instrument. You know, worst case scenario, you do something wrong and you have to buy a new set of strings, or you break a string or something like that. It's really no big deal. I just see so many people that are a little too afraid to work on their instrument, and that's one of the reasons why I'm posting this video, is to show you how, but also give you confidence. You can do it. I'm a normal person. There are plenty of other normal people out there that know how to restring a guitar. It just takes a little bit of practice. So I just want to encourage you to feel free to work on your own guitar and restring it and learn your instrument. The first thing you're going to want to do is take off the old strings. So I'm going to use a string winder. If you don't have one, you can just manually do it with your hand. But since I have one, I'm going to use it. So just loosen all the strings. Now, it is worth pointing out that before you loosen your strings, if you've got a pickup under your saddle, a Paizo pickup specifically, that you may not want to loosen all the strings at once. Reason for that is because Paizo pickups are very sensitive to string pressure on them. The balance can get really messed up, meaning that your treble side, your bass side could be louder or softer than the other, and so once the balance is set, it can be kind of temperamental and hard to get back in a good place. So if that's the case and you got a pickup under there and you don't really want to mess around with it, just leave your outside strings up to tension, or just change one string at a time. So instead of taking them all off, just change one and then go to the next one, and so on and so forth, before loosening all the strings. This guitar doesn't have a pickup in it, so I'm not concerned about the balance of the pickup, so I'm just going to take them all off. Now at this point, things can get a little tricky. To be able to pull the rest of the string out, we got to pull out this pin that's holding it into place. And a lot of times, the fit is very tight, so you won't be able to pull it out by your fingers. And so my solution, there are a couple different ways you can do that. You can get your small little pair of pliers. You can grab the pin and pull it straight up, you know, and that'll work. You want to be careful if your pliers have these little teeth in them. You can end up marring your plastic pins, and it might not be a good idea if you have bone pins, because you could chip them out. So if you're concerned about that, we can also use our wire cutters, kind of get around it, and then use it as kind of like a lever and pull the pin up that way. If that still weirds you out, here's something I used to do a lot. You just grab any kind of coin, or just any hard thing, I guess. I've got a 25-cent coin right here. You just put it up underneath it, and you can use your fingers to feel where the end of those pins are sticking down. Find it, use the coin to help you push from the bottom. If you push up, see how the pin pops out right there. Do the other one, see? So that works pretty well. Another little tip here for you is that sometimes your pins are different sizes, or your holes may be drilled at different sizes. And if you put the wrong one in the hole, it may stick out a little farther. It's generally not a big deal, but if you're concerned about that and you want to keep things how they were, just when you take your pins out, organize them where they were. So this was my low string, you know, to my high string. Now this is a good part of the process where you can start cleaning your guitar if you want to. I've met a bunch of people that like to have that funkiness, that DNA, that sweat, you know, all over their guitar, because it shows what the guitar's been through and they're playing. You know, that's fine, but I'm not like that. So just take a cloth and clean it off. There'll usually be a lot of dust right here where the strings are. Also up here, the headstock, you know, where the strings sit. Just clean it off if you want to. I'll do another video, I think, about how to thoroughly clean your guitar. But for me, just changing strings, that is good enough. So now we can actually start restringing the guitar. Take your strings, open up the packaging. Diodario tends to come in these sealed bags. Some of them are packaged individually. Now, how do you know which string to put on? Well, let's use some common sense. Your lowest in pitch string is on what I call the bottom. Down here, some people call that the top. I think they're crazy. So we want to find our thickest string. A lot of times they'll be labeled. Either just look at your packaging. I happen to know that Diodario uses these colored, let's see if we can get that to focus, these colored pins or little end things. So the brass one is my low E, and then the red one's my A. But just look through your packaging and it'll tell you which string to use where. You don't want to get it mixed up. That's kind of important. So let me explain what happens inside the guitar when you put the strings in. I think this is useful information. So this is our ball end, the other end of the string. This is our pin. There's a little groove, a slot in this, and you want this facing towards the headstock so that the string has a place to be. So the string is kind of going to follow that channel. Now, you don't really want it to look like this inside the guitar. That's kind of how you have to put it in. But usually what will happen is the string will give way and come up. So there will be like, the top of the guitar will be like somewhere around here. And what you want it to look like is the ball end to kind of look like that, with the string going up through that channel, and a little bit of, sorry about the focus, a little about this pin sticking out. That's going to make the ball push up against the bridge plate, which is just a piece of wood underneath the top right here. That way it's going to be the most secure. If you have it like this, when you're playing or tuning or whatever, the string will go bloop, and then you'll be out of tune, and it's just kind of a weird thing. Now, it's hard to explain what that feels like when you're restringing a guitar. You just kind of stick the string in there, you put this pin down in there, and you'll feel the string kind of give way until it catches. Not a huge deal, but that'll help you. It'll save you some time. I just wanted to explain that in case you're kind of wondering. So here we go. I've got the ball end of the string over here. I've got my pin right here with the slot facing that way, if it has a slot. I'm going to put the ball end in, stick in the pin, and while holding kind of the string in place, I just want to push down on the pin until it bottoms out. And then the string stayed in place. I can tug on it, it feels good and solid. So that's that end taken care of. All right, let's get down to why you're actually watching this video. What kind of knot do I use to attach this end of the string to this tuner? Now, let me tell you, there's going to be a million different views out there of what kind of knot to use, how much slack to use, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to show you what I do. I'll show you actually two different ways. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and they work, and I've tried most of them, and it's fine. But there's one way I like to do it particularly, and it holds in place, it's secure, it tunes well, and I'll show you that. I'm a professional guitar tech out on the road, so tuning is kind of what I do. I have to make sure these things hold, and so I'll show you the method that works really well for me. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the hole in the post right here, there's a hole that goes all the way through, is lined up with the string. So we want it facing this way so we can just feed the string easier. So take this end, feed it through the hole, and pull it all the way through. Now you just don't want to start tightening like this. We want to give it some slack. So the method I like to do is actually, I guess I don't really think about it too much. If I turn this around, I kind of hold, I see how much slack is there, about, I guess, the thickness of my hand. So sometimes I'm holding this other end with my left hand. So I'll gauge how much slack, something about like that. Another way to gauge that is by doing that and pulling it through and kind of seeing how much slack that was. So you can use this next tuner as an indication. So right now the string's taut-ish, and I'm gonna kind of I want this much slack. So I'll move it back. See, going from taut to where that tuner is, and that gives me about the same amount of slack here with my right hand. So once I've got that proper amount of slack there, I'm going to just keep the string right here so it doesn't move, so I still am playing with the right amount of slack. Now this method I use actually creates a knot. So it's going to be different depending on which side of the headstock you're on. It's going to be opposite. So starting here on the bass side, I'm going to take my slack right here. I'm going to go, I like to think of it towards the inside of the headstock. So if I'm on this outside, the inside of the headstock would be that direction. If I'm on this side, the inside of the headstock would be that direction. But anyway, so like I said, inside of the headstock, in this case, I'm going like this. So I want to go underneath this portion. So this tail end needs to go around the post and underneath this string right here. Okay, so you see that? I'm going underneath. Now you want to make sure it's tight. So while holding this in place and not letting the string slip through that post any, I'm going to pull it tight like that. Okay, now once I've got it all the way under this string and tight, I'm going to put a little bend in the string by going straight up like that. Okay, so now I can kind of let go, and it's bent kind of where I want it to be. So now we need to tighten down the string. Now there is I'm not sure if it's a reason why it's a standard way, but there is the normal way when you tightening a string would be taking it, from this perspective, taking the tuner and rotating it that direction. I guess technically that would look like it's lefty-loosey, even though it's tightening the string. But that's the correct way to do it. And you'll know if you've done it correctly if the string is going towards that side of this post. Again, assuming we're just talking about this line of tuners. So what that looks like. Okay, so I hold this string with my right hand, kind of put my index finger on that tail end so it doesn't move around. I'm going to get my string winder. You can do it by hand if you want, but I've got the string winder. So I'm going to start turning it in that tightening direction, which looks like it's loosening. So now what's happening is, let me do a little bit. I'll just do it by hand. So you can see how that part that I pulled up is going to get sandwiched by this as I tighten. So let me do a little bit more here. Okay, so you see what's going on there? So as I tighten this part of the string is sandwiching this part that went up. So I keep going. We'll swap to the winder. Okay, and as I go around, this portion needs to kind of stay below the windings. You could have it keep kind of creeping up on the windings, but that's not the best way to do it. You want it to go underneath those coils. So we'll continue tuning it up and make sure you get it in the nut slot and just kind of get it so that there's a note. It doesn't have to be tuned up perfectly. So let me give you a close-up of what that looks like. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. The string is on that side of this post, and we tightened it by turning the peg that way. Okay, so let's do this whole thing again. I've already got the other end of this string. This will be the A string into the bridge on that other end. I've got my hole in the post right here lined up going that way. This end through the hole all the way through. I'm going to pull it taut so I know how much slack to give it. I'm going to pull it back about this much. Okay, use my finger as a stop. I've got the right amount of slack right here. I'm going to keep it from sliding through. I'm going to take this end, the tail end, go towards the inside of the headstock, which is that direction. Okay, it's going to go underneath the playing part of the string right here. I'm going to pull it tight. Once it's tight, I'm going to move it straight up so there's a little bend in it. Now, while using my right hand to keep that bend from getting weird, take my string winder, start turning what looks like to the left, but we're tightening it. And as I do that, I'm going to push down on this so that I'm underneath the subsequent windings. Just gonna keep going, make sure it's in the slot, tune it up to any kind of pitch, just so there's tension on it. We'll tune the guitar later. So now let's take care of these pesky ends right here. If you don't have a wire cutter, what I used to do, just when I was a kid, I'd wind them up, I'd do that so they don't get in the way. But it's a pain, so let's cut it. Invest in some good wire cutters, or just some normal ones. These are pretty heavy duty. I use them all the time. They work on bass strings as well. So we want to clip it, but we don't want to make it sharp so that we're going to destroy our fingers if our hand brushed over this, which can be a problem a lot of times. So remember, our string is going straight up. I'm going to take my clippers. This is the flat end, and I'm going to move it over here, and it's not a very good angle, but I'm just going to clip it. Okay, so now what doing that does, again, I'll get a closer angle here, is you can see, focus, so that was the end that we cut off, and if we look at it from the side, see how it doesn't stick above the post. So I can do this all day and I'm not going to destroy my finger. If you leave it a little high, you can totally stab yourself, and I've done it many times. I've bled a lot from doing that, but if you cut it really close to the post right here, underneath the top of it, you shouldn't have any problems. Here's another look at what that knot looks like. And you can see what I was talking about, how the string gets sandwiched in between the winding and the post. Right there. So there is literally no way that this is going to loosen on me because it's held against the post by the winding. It creates that little knot right there. That's the reason why I like doing it this way. There are other ways to do it and they seem to hold okay, but once in a blue moon, I've had the other ways loosen on me, especially on the treble side. You may disagree with that, but that's been my experience. And like I said, when I'm stringing up a guitar for a guy to play in front of thousands of people, that's the last thing I want to happen. So that's the reason why I do it this way and have that knot there. It does make pulling off the strings a little bit more of a pain, but in the long run, I think that's worth it for me. I'll show you this other method in just a second. So this other method, more or less, start off the same. So, feed my string through. Okay, pull it taut, same as before. It's really the same amount of slack. So if you want to gauge it this way, about that much, stick it through. Okay, that's good enough. Now this other method is you just simply hold the string in place. You don't do that knot thing I was talking about, and you just start winding. I don't prefer to do it this way, but just to show you guys that it does work. I don't mind doing it. This is my guitar that I just play around with. So we just start turning it. You're gonna, again, tune it the same way. You want to hold this end the slack so it holds in place. And as you turn the peg, it's gonna naturally make that bend in the string that I did by hand before. So again, we want this end to go over, or this end to go underneath the windings. Okay, so we just kind of hold it down into place. We keep winding it up. All well and fine. Make sure it's through the nut slot correctly. Okay, now we've got tension on it. There will be a little bit of difference in how we clip the end this time though. So instead of the string sticking straight up, sorry about the focus, it's sticking out the side. That's fine. We'll just use our clippers again, and I just tend to go pretty close to the end. What I don't like about this method is now you run the risk of stabbing yourself. You can take your pliers and move that down or up or whatever. It's just kind of more work. But that's how this method works. pretty much is the same. They work okay. I just don't prefer it. I will say that this method, I think, is probably more common. If you pick up a guitar at a store or whatever, your friends, it's probably going to look a little bit like this. I think that's because it's easier to understand. But like I said, I don't prefer it for the reasons I stated before. If you want to do it this way, that's totally fine. The great thing about music is that you can kind of do things however you want to do it, and as long as it works for you, that's great. But I think I made a case for why that method is a more secure way to tie the knot. Okay, so now what about our treble side? This side of tuners. This is going to be backwards. You can't do it the same way because the string will end up being on the opposite side, or you'll turn it the wrong way. But it's the same thing, just backwards. So here we go, feeding the thing through there. Now I'm going to go back to my preferred method right now. So the string is tight. I'm going to give it some slack again, about this much. Okay. Now, instead of going that direction like we did before, we want to move this direction. So that's why I called it the inside of the headstock. So we're on this side now. We're going to move this slack end to the inside of the headstock and underneath this string. So here we go. Inside the headstock, underneath this string. We're going to pull it tight. Okay, once it's tight, we're going to bend it so there's a bend going straight up. Now at this point, I changed hands from what I was doing before, so I'm going to use my winder in my right hand instead of my left like before. Now the direction we're going to turn this time is, let's see if I get my hand out of the way, is this direction. Okay, so from our perspective, the player's perspective, it's going to be clockwise, where this was counter. Depends on how you want to think about it, like most things in life. So we're going to turn this, what appears to be clockwise from our perspective. Same rules apply. Just want to keep going. I know that's not the best angle, maybe that's a little better. As we go, we're going to move this underneath the windings. Keep going. Oops. Make sure that's in the nut slot. Keep going until we have a note. Okay, so now that's tight-ish. I'm going to clip it again with my clippers. I get as close to the bottom as I can, like that. Okay, I'm not going to stab myself because I used that method. So same but different, just opposite. Let me show you the reason why we want our windings to go underneath. I'm the type of person that I just don't like being told what to do. I want to know why. Okay, so it will depend greatly on guitar. Now this guitar doesn't really matter so much. The reason is because this headstock is at an angle to the fingerboard. So our fingerboard follows this nice straight curve, and then here at the headstock it goes bloop, it goes down like that. We call that break angle. So that's the angle from going straight right here to down. Gibsons, this Yamaha, tend to be guitars that have 3 tuners on each side. They're going to tend to have this type of break angle. So it's not as big a deal. We want a break angle. Reason is because we want to make sure that the string is making a note, or hitting this front edge of the nut. If you can imagine that if this end were up like this, or maybe even just kind of flat across, there wouldn't be a lot of force on this nut to make sure we have a nice clean note. So that's why it's important to have this downward angle. So the reason why we put the string underneath is it increases that angle. Like I said, on this guitar, not a huge deal, but on Fenders or those types of guitars where the headstock is pretty straight across, you want to make sure you wind things down. And especially on like on a Strat or Tele or something like that, the D and the G. I will tend to put a lot more slack on the D and the G to get those to go down farther. I'll do probably another video at some point showing what I mean by that. That's also why Fenders have string trees, the little thing that the string goes underneath and then goes to the tuner to create that break angle. But anyway, I just wanted to explain that. We want that break angle. So let's do this one more time in real time, just so you know. So I'm turning this until the hole is going that way. I'm going to take this end of the string, put it through the hole all the way, pull it tight, give it some slack. So, yep, about that much again, holding with my right hand. Now again, since we're on the treble side, we're going to take the non-playing end of it and go inside the headstock, so this direction this time, underneath the rest of the string. Okay, pull it tight, give it a bend by pulling it straight up. I'm going to switch hands, kind of hold this in place with my left hand. Take the string winder with my right hand, turn it this direction. Make sure that as I'm turning it, I'm pushing, whoops, that's why, pushing down on the string so that as I wind it, we're creating the winds going down. Sure goes in the nut slot. Keep going until we have a note. Excellent. Take our clippers, being careful not to clip the other string. Clip that one so I don't stab myself. And it's really that easy. So now I've got the guitar all strung up, but it obviously is not in tune. Okay, so grab a tuner. I've got this one if you want to use a headstock, or if you got a pickup, plug in, whatever. I'll do a separate video on how to actually tune your guitar. That's just kind of roughly in place now. Tuning is a whole kind of another thing. But the last thing we kind of want to do, well, maybe not the last thing, we want to make sure that our pins are still seated down. This guitar is pretty good about this thing. Depending on your acoustic guitar, as you tighten the string and bring it up to tension, this pin will start to creep up. Okay, not a big deal. You just want to make sure that you push it right back down. Okay, so as you tune it, just look back here, and if they're sticking up crazy amounts, just push it back down with your finger. So congratulations, you restrung your guitar. We're almost done. It's pretty much ready to play. I'll show you one extra step that I like to do that I don't see other people talk about, and maybe I'm crazy, but this again is my experience. So when you restring something, see our strings are going over our saddle right there. Because it's a new string, see how it kind of curves up like that? What I like to do is take the string and push it down a little bit. So instead of at this point right here, it's still kind of continue its curve up. That way, it has a nice place where it starts to go straight. I don't do that just for no reason. In my experience, I've found that the intonation of a guitar, and what that means is maybe your string's in tune, but as you play a chord, the things, or where you fret, things aren't as in tune. But that the intonation of a guitar tends to be a little out unless I do this down there. And I'll kind of do the same thing at the nut, just kind of put a little pressure right there, so that instead of the string following like a curve, because a string, has, it kind of wants to stay at a certain tension or a certain straightness. But if I add a little bit of a bend right there, it tends to sound more in tune. You don't want to like put a big kink in the string, a big bend or whatever. But that's just something I found that works well for me, so try that if you want. And really the last step I'll do is I'll stretch the strings. That's not something probably the average hobbyist will do. But you know that when you put new strings on a guitar, you tune it up, you play something, and it just tends to keep creeping flat and go out of tune. So to keep that from happening, I just, I'll work the strings, pull on them, tug on them, and obviously keep tuning it until it holds in place. I'll do probably another video on that too, because it's an important thing. But I hope this was helpful to you. I'm sure there are other videos out there on how to restring your guitar, but I hope I gave you some other information that maybe wasn't out there, and you feel confident to go and restring your instrument.